Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Chris McPherson Show, your weekly feel of your black and white on all sports. No grey opinions here, and we've got another bumper show coming to you. Make sure, of course, to stay up to date with all of our content across our social media platforms. You can find us on X, you can find us on Instagram, you can find us on Facebook and on TikTok. Plenty of content coming, and we're going to be upping that in the coming weeks. And, of course, on YouTube, our main home here, where we're dropping not only our weekly episodes, but our daily doses as well, when there's little bits of content hitting us that we just can't wait to get to you for that next 7-day turnaround. But as I said, another big show to come. So let's get into it and let's welcome in the man, the maestro, the man behind the ones and twos, JR Carter, to talk around the grounds. JR, good to have you back. And you're going to be multitasking, pressing the buttons and around the grounds.
I know, right? Like there's a bit going on in this studio today. So
well, it is. It's wonderful. We're actually in studio together, so it's a nice little bit of bonding experience, getting close and chatting and digging into the sport. And I'll tell you something that wasn't all that close, JR. The start of the Club World Cup, I'll get that the right way around, over in the US, and our Kiwi brethren, Auckland City FC, the one semi-professional team that did go over. They were without some of their players, including some that couldn't get time off from work, the joys of semi-professional, and they took on the might of Bayern Munich, who definitely did not take it lightly in their first game. 10-0 drubbing Auckland. It does raise some questions about the viability of having the structure the way it is, with a team coming from semi-professional leagues in Oceania coming up against the world's best.
Yeah, it was something that caught me by surprise, really, because like as soon as I seen Auckland, I'm like, oh, so like the A-League's Auckland team, and then reading further into it, it is a separate semi-professional squad that's just not up to the task. Like I know that there's this whole thing about like the way the rules are working because Auckland's playing in an Australian comp, they can't get in that way, but something probably needs to be like some sort of rule exemption where, or even just like a nomination like of each nation actually nominating from a national body level. Nominating the team that goes over.
Yeah, I think there's a challenge if they nominate, but I understand the logic of that. I think it'll be sorted out. And Lockie talked about this, I think, on the last episode that we had. So link back to that one, guys, and have a look at last week's episode in the football segment with Lockie Avil from Ramble Australia. But this Oceania Pro League that's been suggested looks like it could be a solution for that. It'll be interesting, though, because there's potential for Australian teams to be in that as well. And look, it'll uplift it a little bit. The reality is it wouldn't matter if it was an A-League side. They're not going to beat a side like Bayern Munich or Boca Juniors or these sorts of teams that they've drawn in this pool. But you would think it would be more competitive because it doesn't look great when you're having 10-0 scorelines. That said, some of the other games have been 4-0, so, and that's involved the likes of PSG, who just won the UEFA Champions League. So, that said, PSG won the UEFA Champions League by 5 in their final. So I just think that the fact that they crossed that double-digit bridge, JR, I think, 5s, 6s, even 7s, once you start to go 8s, 9s and 10s, it starts to really raise some questions. But, hey, hats off to these guys from Auckland for going and giving it a crack because, they've got in and they've turned up and, mate, they've done what they can, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience to say you played against Bayern Munich.
Look, maybe like a solution where we have someone like maybe a change in their coaching staff just for these games, like a Steve Orica as someone to come in and like just maybe slip in that way.
Just a random change of personnel. They all play in the Auckland City kit. A bit like the baseball team in The Simpsons when Mr. Burns just started recruiting everyone and made them get rid of their sideburns.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, as long as they've got good haircuts, they'll be good to go in the US. And but look, we wish them all the best. Hopefully they build on this over the next couple. I don't expect that they're looking or expecting to win any games, but if they get a goal, I think there might be some celebrations. And I'm sure either way, Auckland City will be partying hard once their third game is complete. And as I said, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for these guys, so I don't begrudge them for taking it. I just think that FIFA and Oceania Football Confederation need to sort this out a little bit. But we'll wait and see. Look, they weren't given the biggest of hidings on the weekend. That honour probably goes to George Kambosos, who, let's just put it this way, he was talking the talk in the lead up to his fight, but he didn't walk the walk, JR.
Yeah, no, soundly defeated, and it sounds to me like possibly career over at this stage. So, like, not great to hear, but look, he went in talking a lot of smack from what I've been reading in this one.
Yeah, Richardson Hitchens, and that is a mouthful to say really quickly, defended his IBF junior welterweight title. And the thing for Kambosos is this is another crushing loss against one of the world's top fighters. Against that next tier down, he more than holds his own. He's actually strong. He kind of sits in that 1.5 tier looking at his career at the moment. And to your point, like, I think it's either he's going to have to go back and just take some cash fights and, just do some fights for the money. But I don't think he's going to be offered too many more world title fights, which is a shame. At his best, he was dominant, he was strong, but he's just not there anymore. And when you've got young guys like Hitchens, who's only 27, coming through and starting to make their mark more and more, and Hitchens now, like he landed 200 punches in the fight and just dominated. And Hitchens is now 20-0 with 8 knockouts. That's starting to build a really, imperative record that is going to be hard to beat. So I just think, George Kambosos, it's sad to say because he's been, a name and a headline in Australian boxing for a little bit now, but it's going to be back to the drawing board for him and his camp. I'm not sure where that leads, whether it does lead to retirement, whether it leads to just stepping down into, maybe some continental belts and things rather than international ones. But it's definitely going to be a reconsideration because I just don't think that, people can take that many beatings. An 8th round TKO just through that body blow, it was just vicious. And we wish him all the best, but I think that his time at the top, might be over. But look, if he wants to prove us wrong, I'm always happy to be proven wrong, JR.
Yeah, look, anything can happen in the world of boxing. Like we've seen the resurgence of Zoo and then the falling of Zoo again. So like anything can happen.
Certainly can, but it seems that the theme of the Round the Grounds at the moment is people falling from their luck, JR, because we're going to move on to the Demon, Alex de Minaur, and he crashed out in the first round of the Queen's tournament, which really puts into question his Wimbledon resurgence. And we know the French Open, he didn't perform as well as he might have liked. But look at this Queen's tournament. Alexei Popyrin, Australia's number 2, got through. Adam Walton lost after being a lucky loser, but he lost to Carlos Alcaraz on centre court, and Jordan Thompson retired hurt. So it wasn't a great day overall for the Aussies. Popyrin did beat Alexander Vukic, another Australian. But de Minaur is the most concerning. It was his first match on grass this year after he got bundled out in the first week of the French Open. And while he didn't take on a mug when he came up against Yuri Lehechka of the Czech Republic, he's the world number 30, I think, off the top of my head. It's just concerning. We know that the Demon grass is probably one of his most favoured surfaces when we look at it. He made the quarterfinals of Wimbledon last year. He's made the 4th round there before as well, a couple of years before that, and it's probably where he had his hopes pinned after being dashed in that French Open second round. And I just think it puts into question, it's probably going to see him, start to slide out of that top 10 if he can't, push back to the quarterfinals of Wimbledon. And it really threatens, I guess, Australia's hopes of going deep into this tournament. We're going to need a Popyrin or one of these other dark horses to push or rely on the women's with Daria Kasatkina, which, yeah, it's a bit sad. He is our current only top 10 player in the men's or the women's, and very quickly may not be.
Yeah, look, given his grass specialization, you would have expected him to go quite a bit further, and given he's had those previous results, but it's just not great news for Australian tennis at this point. We don't really have that marquee player at the moment. We've got a lot of people that talk a lot of trash, which we won't go too far into, but we don't have that sort of just consistent player in those top 10 sort of circles now.
No, well, the trash talker and Mr. Kyrgios got to mention in our daily dose that dropped earlier today with Christian talking about the US Open mixed doubles and the fast that is. So check that out if you haven't already. It's a debacle in itself, and anything that involves Nick Kyrgios quite often falls into that basket. But while we're on the subject of underperforming Australians and our daily doses, JR, I pulled apart the US Open the other day. We're heading in. Adam Scott was looking like he was on the cusp of maybe chasing that second major, and the curse of Aussies at Choke-mont. We talked about Aaron Baddeley and his 3-putt that saw him shoot 10 over. Adam Scott did his best to chase that down. A 9 over in the final round just meant that, there was a bizarre shot there where he had to try and pitch his way out of the rough, and it just all started to fall apart from there early. He never looked like he was comfortable, and look, he wasn't the only one that did that, but he just, fell away. And unfortunately for him, JJ Spawn shot 2 over, which was enough to see him 1 under for the whole tournament. But Adam Scott dropped right down that leaderboard, finishing tied for 12th in the end, 6 over the card after starting the day 3 under. And, mate, Aussies and Oakmont, you just maybe just don't go if you're an Aussie and Oakmont draws the hosting rights for the US Open in about another 7 years' time.
Look, Oakmont's cursed. That's sort of just the name of the game. Even in PGA Tour, the Tiger Woods games, Oakmont is cursed. I have been up in tournaments by 20 strokes and then fallen over. It's just not a good place to play.
Yeah, you got to be from somewhere else. You got to be, but again, to be fair, even Sam Burns, who was, 1 shot in front of Adam Scott going to that last round, he shot 8 over. But 9 overs, 10 overs. It's Adam was going so well, and you hope that this isn't something that rattles him again, and we can see the best of him. But we haven't seen, outside of those opening 3 rounds, we haven't seen the best of Adam Scott for a little bit. It's been a long time since his Masters win. So hopefully we can see some Aussies back in the headlines, because it feels like it's been a little while since Adams win, Cam Smith's win even, and it's time for an Aussie to fight back. Maybe Minwoo Lee or someone like that can get their name in the headlines and take one of these majors in the next 12 months.
Yeah, look, the opportunity is there, but just got to stick those landings now.
We certainly do. It's about being consistent over the 4 rounds. Or if you're only a 3-round golf player like Adam Scott, lives the answer. 54 holes, why not? JR, we're going to go right into your wheelhouse now. I know you're excited about talking about this one. The Florida Panthers, in their 3rd Stanley Cup playoff in 3 seasons, have gone back-to-back with Stanley Cup titles. They have cleaned out the Edmonton Oilers. They've taken American pride back. Donald Trump will be ecstatic.
Look, yeah, it's a big deal to take a trophy away from a Canadian team, whereas like Edmonton, like the games have sort of gone on a little bit, but Florida just like they've got a system happening down there. Like they've got building something of a dynasty, if anything, much to match what the Oilers were like sort of in the late 90s, or early 90s, I should say. So yeah, just a great result for Florida.
It certainly is, and you talk about the Oilers and their dynasties. They are the first team in full seasons. I know Tampa Bay over the COVID period did make 3 Stanley Cups since the Oilers in 83 to 85 to make 3 Stanley Cup playoffs in a row, and then to go and take 2 of those. They're setting up a dynasty, as you say, and Florida is not necessarily somewhere you'd necessarily associate with ice, or certainly not ice skating. Anyway, we'll leave that to the viewers' discretion. But they've built a dynasty. They've got a really good following down there, and it's becoming a challenging place to visit. And they've got a side that stacks up on paper and on the ice rink, and very deserving champions back to back in the Stanley Cup. It's something though, JR, that probably flies under the radar here in Australia. I know ice hockey's not as big, but it sits in the shadow, obviously, of the NBA, and we've got our winter sports going on as it's wrapping up. Plus, we had the World Test Championship, but I just felt it really needed a little bit of limelight here because, the Aussie ice hockey scene's actually, building here in terms of the AIHL. And, we're in Newcastle where the North Stars have been a dominant force in the last sort of 10 to 15 years in that competition. But, I just think it's a sport that I love watching it. I know you're a fan as well. So, I think it's an opportunity. We'll have to do a bit of a lead in when the NHL gets building again and get a bit more coverage on it, I think, because it needs a bit more of a spotlight in the Aussie sports lens.
Yeah, and that Australian competition, like it's had some ups and downs over the last couple of years, like just in terms of sort of teams dropping in and out. But it is a quality competition. It's like it's kind of like your Canadian retirement plan as well. It's like where a lot of these sort of ex-NHL players are coming over here just to sort of play the last couple of seasons out, much the same way like an NRL player would go and play in the UK in the Super League. Yeah,
100% it is. And, the Aussie competition is actually in full swing at the moment. And I think at the moment there might be maybe 8 teams. I think the Central Coast are back in now after a bit of an absence as well. So, look, if you are in one of the major centres, Newcastle or the Central Coast, go and check it out. It's a pretty economical day out, and it's certainly it's a pretty good, decent standard of play. And, it's probably one of the few sports left where you can still see a biff unless you're going to the boxing or the MMA.
That's right. Just make sure you take a blanket if you're going over to Warners Bay.
Yeah, the Newcastle rink is a little bit fresh. But again, it's an ice rink, so what would you expect?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, JR, that brings us to a close for Around the Grounds. We might just refresh, rehydrate, maybe put the helmets on and strap into our race cars for the F1.
Absolutely.
Well, it's time to hit the track, and it is time to burn some rubber, and we welcome back J.R. Carter, our producer and motorsport extraordinaire, to talk about the Canadian F1 Grand Prix. JR, there was some interesting, intriguing, and very unimaginative passages in this race.
Yeah, look, it was a very, very early morning race too. So like we're fortunately enough we're coming back into the European sort of time. But the big takeaway from the weekend is George Russell back on the winners' podium. There was a rather large protest from Red Bull due to what does actually look like George brake testing Max at one point, which like. George, just pull your head in, mate. Like I get the you like being a little bit contrary, like you like sort of stirring things up, but that was a clear brake check. The big takeaway that I've got from it though is that for whatever reason he was not penalised for a start, but then along with the other British drivers, they received no penalty points against their particular instances. So this has just caused a massive sort of clash in regards to consistency within what's happening with those penalties. Like Max is like up in arms at this stage.
Yeah, I can see there's this view, right, of the British receiving favourable treatment, and people have got historical, moments that even talk back to it with Russell and obviously Lewis and some of these guys. But, the end of the day, some of the things that Max has gotten away with where he's only been given 1 point that a lot of other people would have had the absolute book thrown at them, there might be a slight British slant, but I think there's also a slight top of the grid slant at times too.
There is, but what happens if Max and George were in the opposite positions at that point?
Yeah, well, this is true. I'm sure the FIA will tell you that they would have judged it exactly the same, JR.
That's what they'll say. But at the end of the day, it might have been that, hey, we're going to go into the European races and Max has got his ban finally.
Well, yeah, and that might lead to a whole different story of Red Bull and their application for new licenses and different other things, mightn't it? So, there's some peculiar things sitting behind the scenes and a lot of chairs to be readjusted depending on how things play out, both from teams going to bat for their drivers and lots more over the remainder of this season, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Like I don't think we've seen the last of like driver changes this season either. Like I still think while Yuki's now embedded at Red Bull, I think the money's flowed too much for him to sort of be dropped out now. I do think there's still a couple of drivers. Like Colapinto's definitely still in absolute danger. Like he's got till Silverstone, which is what they said. So look, wait and see.
Yeah, I don't know if it's classed as danger when you've been given, it's like being told you're going to die at a certain date and then you say, oh, geez, my time's running out. Well, of course it is. So good luck, Franco. But we'll wait and see. Maybe go and take up what JR thought you were doing the other week with aerials and different other things in surfing. The Colapintos seem to be doing better at surfing than F1. But on that George Russell piece, JR, can you explain to me why hasn't Mercedes re-signed George Russell? He's won a race. He's, done what was asked of him.
Look, there's one reason and one reason only I think he hasn't re-signed at this point, and that is this young man right here. He has got his breakthrough podium in his rookie year. So this was great to see, but I think he is the future. So young Kimi, I think, is going to be the face of Ferrari, not a Ferrari, of Mercedes.
Breaking news.
Of Mercedes. I'm thinking about Lewis because he's in Lewis's seat. But he's going to be the face of Mercedes long term, and Toto's seen that. He's gone, okay, maybe I don't need to have a very experienced driver there. Maybe I can get another junior in, or who knows? Maybe Valtteri's got a plan.
So what you're telling me is Toto's basically figured out that there's slave child labour available and that's what he's going to rely on?
I'm not sure if that's the takeaway here, but yeah, that's what it looks like.
Why not? That's a great headline to run with. Let's run with that. That sounds great. Toto Wolff endorses child labour. And it's not that far away with Kimi. So anyway, let's move on to some more, slightly more adult people, maybe based on their chronological age, not by their driving. And our friends at the Papaya, obviously Oscar's extended his lead at the top after, finishing on the podium, but his man Lando, not so much.
No, so we finally had what the good people at F1 Troll have referred to as the Papaya Incident. So we've had the timeline of what's going to happen this year. Like, in all honesty, these boys have picked it pretty heavily.
Nostradamus stuff.
If Lando gets a little bit better during the summer break, these guys have absolutely nailed it because he'll still have the mathematic. But I think Oscar, if things keep going the way they're going, Oscar's got it. He just needs to keep doing what he's doing and keep being consistent in what he's doing. The actual incident itself, was just a nothing incident. Lando screwed up so badly. And then you got the likes of failed hair transplant recipient and former F1 driver Jacques Villeneuve just going on about how, Oscar was nasty. Oscar did nothing. Oscar was a car length in front and Lando had to swerve to not actually just plow in the back of him.
Why is Jacques Villeneuve such an anti-Australian douche? We know that he came out against Ricciardo previously. He just seems to have a slant against Aussies. For a guy who had a pretty good record here in Australia and was reasonably well liked by the Australian crowd when he's a driver, he just seems like he's like everyone else in the pit lane, in the paddock, in the F1 fandom. Even Lando admitted he was in the wrong. Jacques Villeneuve's the only one that's living in some sort of dream world, as you said, along with his hair.
Yeah, it was just, again, it was a nothing incident and it was 100% Lando's fault because Lando is we've said it time and time again on the show, Lando chokes in big moments. And that was just another great example of it.
Well, to be fair, Jacques Villeneuve just continued to portray the fact that, Canadians aren't popular on the F1 scene at the moment. He has actually overtaken Lance Stroll as the least popular Canadian, which is some taking.
Yeah, look, that's taken a lot of effort. Although, let's be honest, the GOAT himself, Nicholas Latifi, is the greatest Canadian driver of all time.
Well, he's the best. These two are both just living in their dad's shadows.
That's right.
Maybe that's what they got in common. Maybe that's why he's sticking up for him. He understands what it's like to live in Dad's shadow.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, well, we know, again, the track there is named after Jacques' dad. I'm not sure what Jacques has got named after him. Maybe, I don't know, a ticket booth somewhere. Well, that's plenty that's happened in the rearview mirror. Something that's happening a long way in advance. The Thai government are just going absolutely wild here. A $1.9 billion bid for a new Grand Prix from 2028. So they're looking to sign a 5 to 10 year deal. They're getting well in advance. They're happy to sign a contract from 2028 with talk that they would accept even an offer into the 2030s as their start date.
Look, the Thai government's probably onto something here because it would mean a fifth actual Asian race, like including Australia in that sort of regard. And they're probably being very realistic about like extending that timeline to being like a 2030 start because we do have that congested F1 calendar at the moment. You've got a lot of tracks that are actually contracted for quite a while. Ones that are up for contract next year include Barcelona. So I have confirmed that there are going to be 2 Grand Prix in Spain. The Madrid one is going to be labeled as the Spanish Grand Prix. The other one will be the Barcelona or some sort of sponsored Grand Prix. So that Barcelona is up for renewal next year, which means like realistically we're probably not going to get another Barcelona. We've got the likes of Spa becoming an every 2 year sort of race. So it's a matter of finding a spot to slot it in. I think that Spanish spot's probably where it's going to be.
Yeah, we talked about it either last week or the week before about the congestion of the calendar. It doesn't feel like they could fit many more in. It's going to start to become, like it'll end up being like the tennis tour if it starts to do that, where some teams will end up opting out of certain races and it'll be some sort of weird thing where they, there's 28 races, but you've only got to complete 24 and then it'll become ducks and drakes would be the only way I can see that working because you can't ask drivers to be and teams on the road more. We obviously commended the FIA on how they've streamlined the calendar a bit for next year and this would work into that favour as well. It would mean they could do an extended Asian leg. And obviously the Asian market is growing rapidly. It's why, the likes of Honda and some of these other Asian engine companies are putting more money in because their domestic markets are right behind F1 as the American market is growing too. So it's an interesting piece. It's been so European dominated for a long time that we're now starting to see it become a much more truly global sport, which is a great piece for us. And for Aussie fans, it makes it a bit easier to get to some of the races if we get another one in Thailand.
Look, and like we've sort of spoken about, okay, what would be the least expensive F1 race to go to? Look, in all honesty, accommodation around Thailand, pretty cheap. So like that'd be a good one to get to.
It certainly would. So just on that, the plans are for a 5.7 kilometre trip, a track, I should say, north of central Bangkok. Now, I'm going to absolutely butcher this, JR, because my Thai pronunciation is not something I practice, between Krung Thep Apiwat Central Terminal Station and Chatuchak Park, so up on the northern side of Bangkok. So it won't be, it'll be accessible to the city, which is good. That's obviously the challenge with some of these new tracks when they go and put them quite a way away from anything. We've seen this in a few different places. Russia was the biggest example of that. It was miles from anything. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. The Thai Prime Minister is right behind this. Obviously, they've got a Thai driver in Alex Albon. There's a big tie-in, and we saw that, obviously a different success level, but the Dutch Grand Prix became a huge thing and a huge focus for the FIA when Max became such a headline article. So having a Thai driver, and Alex is looking, even more secure on the grid than ever, would be a good tie-in. But obviously 2030 is a long time away, and 5 years in F1's a long time.
5 years in F1 is a long time, though. I think Albon, if Albon just wants to keep racing, I think he'll keep racing until he's ready to wrap up. I don't think Williams will ever move him on at this point. So.
Yeah, I think he's a good fit there. It's just about, whether he wants to go and do something else or whether he gets sick of, being mid competitive. I don't think he's going to be one of those drivers that's probably going to bang down the door for a top seat anytime soon. But we'll watch this space, JR, as the F1 circus, the F1 calendar and the F1 circuit continues to roll on, mate. A big thank you as always, digging into all of the meat and potatoes, the rubber hitting the road of the F1.
No worries at all.
Moving from the racetrack to the cricket nets, and there's plenty to pick apart despite it being the middle of winter. And when we talk cricket, where there's one man we go to first, time and foremost, and that is Paul Dennett from Dennett on Cricket Podcast. Good to have you back, Paul.
Great to be here, Chris.
Mate, there's a little bit to pick apart. Obviously, the biggest talking point, and one I'd love to get your thoughts on. I know there's lots of strong opinions on this. The World Test Championship, there's been some pretty strong words thrown around in regard to the Australians and the performance. It looked like the bowlers were going to absolutely dominate and were in a pretty strong position until enter Aiden Markram and a slightly flattening pitch that saw South Africa home.
Yeah, it shows what I know. I tweeted out after South Africa won the toss and bowled that I thought they'd made a mistake. And, in hindsight, that's probably the moment they won the match. Now, that's not to diminish their achievement. It is a wonderful moment in South African cricket, and I think it was pretty universal that everyone on the planet who followed cricket, except for Australians, was cheering South Africa on. I think it was a great game of cricket, and I really do think that the conditions did substantially change. And going into day 3, Australia had been on top throughout the Test match, and then the pitch really flattened out, as it has done a bit in Lords. I've been looking at the various different matches over the last couple of years in red ball cricket in Lords, and there are some weird scorecards where, one side will get 100 odd, the other side will get 100 odd, and then the next side will get 400 and strange things like that. And so, in England, they probably overstated a little bit, but there seems to be truth that when it is blazing sunshine, it is easier to bat. Now, there were periods on days 1 and 2 where the sun was out and it wasn't so easy, but I think that for all the postmortems, I think you've got to recognise that if Australia had bowled first, Australia probably would have won the match, and we'd be now saying, South Africa, they can't win anything. The choking continues, this juggernaut of Australia. So, we do react a lot, and I suppose that's the way it's got to be.
What is the joys of the toss in Test cricket, I suppose, is it does bring in an advantage. There's obviously a lot of talk about, home toss bias and things like that, but you can't ask too much here. The ICC governed the pitch conditions. It was set for, two teams that, in terms of their pace attack, stack up similarly. We saw that. Rabada got 5 in their first innings. Cummins got 6, but that's probably a story for another day. But maybe it should have been a warning sign for us when Mitchell Starc started to look quite handy with the bat. I mean, he's not a mug, but he's not normally the guy who gets the high bat.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was looking concerning. More so concerning was that Josh Hazlewood batted for almost an entire session, and when he got out, he flung his head back in frustration because it was a soft dismissal, if you can say that about a number 11, but it was. He went to sort of play a forcing shot off the back foot, off the part-time off-spin of Aidan Markram and hit it straight to short cover and got out. So I think the Aussies knew. They were almost batting as much for time as for runs on that final day because they knew that it would be easy, or easier, once the South Africans got in. But again, I want to stress that they are worthy champions. There's no sort of sour grapes from me. I'm not complaining. And I think it was the thing about the pitch is as long as the pitches are not flat and we get 600 play 600, then I'm happy. I can quibble a bit and say it would have been nicer if there's a little bit more pace on. But on the whole, I thought that days 1 and 2 were some of the most stupendously entertaining Test cricket I'd seen in a long time. Day 3, the first session was very slow, but there was that tension building. And then throughout the rest of day 3, there was just the gradual sort of change from Australia being on top to, oh my God, South Africa are actually going to do this evidently. And then they finished it off on day 4. So I think it was a worthy final and a great occasion. I'm really disappointed. I was on the edge of my seat, a bit like I'm not usually, except for really, really important games of cricket. In terms of normally I'm just happy for Australia to win. If they lose, then I'm over it in 5 minutes. But I'm still a bit disappointed now, actually.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed. It would have been nice to see it go the distance and maybe see an Australian win. But as you say, had South Africa been playing anyone else, I would have been like everyone else and been absolutely pumped for them because they've been perennial, well, not quite bridesmaids, but, they've gotten to the semi-final stage of so many things. They've gotten so close but so far. And for the proud cricketing nation that they are and how dangerous and stacked they were through the 90s and early 2000s, it is probably surprising that they haven't won anything yet. And we know that they were almost an arch nemesis for us, before India were in that era. They were one of our biggest challenges. So, as you say, well deserved. It's probably a little interesting that it'll be the footnote in history that those teams of Callis and Klusner and Cronje and Alan Donald never won anything, but this team did. And maybe Aidan Markram one day will look at him a little bit differently. And I think he's probably a player that we saw a bit of a glimpse of really the potential that he does have, and he probably hasn't quite nailed consistently for them yet.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Compared to the galaxy of stars they've had, he's a very handy player, averaging in the high 30s, but, you wouldn't say that he's at that level of some of those players that you mentioned. I mean, as much as I am disappointed, it does underline that they are a great cricketing nation. And it was a bit unpalatable, I found, in commentary, Matthew Hayden a little bit talking to Graham Smith, another fantastic player, as though greatness was wrapped into Australia's DNA and talking down to them. And I felt like saying, as you mentioned then, Chris, or alluded to, they beat Australia 3 successive series in a row in Australia not that long ago, which is a very, very rare thing. they regularly lose players to all corners of the world, including, to Australia, Marnus Labuschagne and Michael Neser in the recent past, to Kevin Peterson and plenty of others. And yet they just keep on producing. They keep on producing. And, it's demonstrably not their number one sport. That's football, and number two is rugby. Cricket potentially is their number three sport, but they are a great cricketing nation. Hopefully this inspires the world to realise that Test cricket, we keep on saying it, but it's worthy of saying, Test cricket needs to be more than just Australia, England and India, because matches like this prove that.
They certainly do, and it's it sets up an interesting next couple of years, because now South Africa obviously will have the target on their back, and for the Australians, it probably triggers, some I guess, views to what's next. Obviously, our bowling stood up, our batting didn't, and there'll be calls for some change to that. Marnus Labuschagne, or Labuschagne as he's going by now. Maybe we'll give him his South African name and send him back there the way he's playing. But he's going to be under pressure, as are a couple of others, as we head towards the West Indies.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to get dropped. The only reason probably that he wouldn't get dropped is the sad injury to Steve Smith, that nasty finger injury that looks like it's going to keep him out from at least the first test in the Caribbean. That was one of the forgotten great points of this game, that Smith looked the best I've ever seen. He looked right up to his absolute best. That on those first 2 days when no one could lay a bat on the ball, he looked like he was batting on a different pitch. So that's really exciting, and hopefully this finger injury is only a little blip. But I think that they've run out of patience with Labuschagne. I found it intriguing that they have, or at least it's being reported that the import of Andrew McDonald's words is that they're going to back Khawaja through to the end of the Ashes, because he was fantastic in Sri Lanka. He struggled last summer against Bumrah. I think there's a feeling, well, he may well go to the West Indies and be fantastic there, but does that mean he's going to excel in the Ashes? He rising 39. He's been a wonderful player for Australia. I'm happy for him to be in the side in the West Indies, but I think that if they don't feel that he is the right person for South Africa, for the Australian summer, then they need to be ruthless and make the decision there. But yeah, the top three, with obviously Cameron Green failing as well, I'm more forgiving of that. He got two really good balls, barely, was out there for 5 minutes in total. I'm not so worried about Cameron Green. I'm more than happy with him. One person that, again, looked good without really completely dominating is Alex Carey. We could do worse than throw him up the top of the order the way that he's playing.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some interesting questions. And look, I'm Usman Khawaja, unashamedly, one of his biggest fans. I love Usman. I love what he's brought in his second coming. I love the story of that, return. But he's just looking like, some of those signs. And, I'm a very similar age, so I can talk to some of those signs of eyesight and some of those things that start to deteriorate as you creep up towards 40, and it's the reason we don't see very many Test cricketers pushing past their mid to late 30s, is starting to slowly fade on him on those quicker decks. And you're right, I think he'll go really well in the West Indies. He's come into his own on some of these slower turning decks, and we're seeing more of those coming out of the West Indies. But does that mean he's the best option for the Test summer here against England? Possibly not, but at the same time, we need to have someone that we're really comfortable with. And there's people that have shown glimpses. Sam Consis is one who's in there, but we can't even bed down a confident opening partner for Usman. So to call for his head for someone else, I think we're in a situation where it's a matter of choosing between two evils almost.
Yeah, I mean, I probably can't talk on team selection, having advocated for Mitchell Starc being excluded from the World Test Championship final, and that went really well for me. But having said that, I think that we've just got to be clear-eyed with Khawaja, and if he's good enough to play in the West Indies, don't not pick him on some sort of nebulous sort of thought that, we've got to blood someone else for the Ashes. We don't want to take the West Indies lightly. We lost the last Test match that we played against them. But by the same token, if then it's clear that he's not in the top 6 or 7 for the first Test match in the Ashes, have no compunction in dropping him then. It sort of irks me when they're saying things like, well, we need him because Sam Constas needs someone to learn from. And I just think... I think they overplay that substantially. Sure, he would be a great influence to have, but he's not going to improve Sam Constas's hand-eye coordination. He can give him any kind of tips outside of the actual middle. I don't know, coming around to what I always say is pick your best 11 and don't try to overcomplicate things.
I would have thought if Usman Khawaja was there to mentor Sam Constas and do these other things that, he's employed as an assistant coach, and surely they've got some of those. We've had some absolute greats around the Australian ranks. Ricky Ponting's been one of those that's been in and out in recent times. So surely there's someone, a Ricky Ponting or, another former opener, Michael Di Venuto has been another one that's been in and around there. But surely that's that role, not the guy who's batting out with him in the middle, because that's not their job, because they've got another job to do.
All you need, and I'm going to sound a bit flippant and probably bitter about my own lack of batting prowess, but all it seems to be is that they say, just when you're really struggling, you'll realise that because you weren't watching the ball closely. Just watch it out of the bowler's hand, and then you'll be fine. And that's the only advice they give, to which I feel like saying, I know, but I can't. I'm trying to watch it out of the bowler's hand like you talk about, and there's a blur and suddenly the ball's upon me. So that's the one piece of advice that batsmen seem to need. Just watch it out of the bowler's hand. So, yeah, anyone can give him that advice.
Anyone can open for Australia based on that advice. We could all do it. It's nice and simple, right? Let's do that. So, so it's going to be interesting. The one thing for sure is that the man sitting behind our ones and twos will ensure that we don't recall any marshes, because that'll get him up in ours. We know how that'll go. I'm getting the side eye from the producer at the moment. But, it's going to be interesting to see what we do for the West Indies. I'm with you. I think we need to take them with all seriousness, considering we lost on our own home turf at the Gabba. Playing them in the West Indies, not a team to be taken lightly, despite some of the challenges they've had. And lots of people thought we wandered into this World Test Championship just going, it's Australia's to lose, and we did that. So let's not do that again in the West Indies, because that would be absolutely the most horrible of preparations for the Ashes.
But I don't think that our mental approach was anything other than taking it seriously. You could argue that Hazelwood stayed on in the IPL, whereas the South Africans were taken back. So when the IPL got extended, Australia said, okay, to our players, you can stay on longer and play till the end. I don't think that really made a huge difference. And I can understand why, if you played for a franchise as Josh Hazelwood had done for the entire tournament, and you'd been one of their leading players. So, we mock the IPL and say, it's all a bit confected, but still, you would want to play through and play to the final. So I don't really blame him on that. So I'm sure we'll go to West Indies with full determination. My concern is around picking players based on what is important for the Ashes, rather than picking players based on what is important for the West Indies. And I suspect that we'll probably see Inglis come into the side, and that if Smith is out through injury and if Labuschagne is omitted, it's probably going to be Inglis and Constas that will probably be the two replacements, I would guess.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We'll wait and see whether they make the brave move, or whether the Smith injury might be cover for Marnus to get another lifeline. We'll wait and see. And look, I'd love to be proven wrong. Many were proven wrong with Usman when he made his return, and we love those stories of redemption. But we'll wait and see. While we're talking that sort of Caribbean, North American part of the world, the cricket franchise game continues on, and Major League Cricket's still going around, Paul. And a recently retired from some of the Australian colours man by the name of Glenn Maxwell is putting on an absolute clinic at the moment. Oh,
it's so good to see. I mean, he had a really bad IPL with the bat, as he did last IPL as well. And, I was actually saying that if he doesn't get some runs, then he might actually find himself out of Australia's T20 side. So to play an innings that is so typical of him, I don't know how many sixes it was. It was into the double digits. Was it the Coliseum in Auckland? Was it? It is pretty exciting. Major League Cricket. The crowd wasn't huge, but the fact that they're clearly making steps year on year, and there's a strong feeling that this Major League Cricket is, it's gone from nothing and probably what we thought was going to be a bit of a novelty to now it's behind the IPL. There wouldn't be that many T20 leagues actually ahead of it now. So in a very short space of time, it has become rather significant, which is great to see. Cricket fans have always fantasized about what it would be like if cricket was actually big in America. It's never going to obviously be a major sport, but if it could get a niche there, that would be pretty cool. Yeah, well, that's it. It's not going to penetrate that top four market. It's probably going to sit, your seventh or eighth eventually. But there's a lot of expats over there. There's other Americans that are getting in and around it. I've seen a few baseball social media influencers getting around, having a chat with different cricket players, doing some different cricket-related things. And saw one the other day, batting, hitting home runs with a cricket bat, wearing a Washington kit in one of them. So. And we're seeing the alignment too. I think Washington Freedom, which is one of the sides over there, is aligned with the New South Wales Blues. And there's been a lot of these sorts of pieces that have happened, which is great to see. And that obviously talks the fact, as you say, that if it's not already established, it will very quickly, at the rate it's sort of gaining, become the second biggest tournament in terms of, the franchise world. It sits nicely in the calendar for a lot of the Southern Hemisphere traditional cricket markets because it doesn't clash with those. It sits before the English cricket really gets into full tilt in terms of its shorter form. So
it sits in that nice spot. It works well, and yeah, at the end of the day, they're managing to spend the money on the big names, which is what drives it. And yeah, it's ticking boxes, and the cricket calendar is just filling up. We'll have our eyes to the Big Bash shortly. The Big Bash and Women's Big Bash drafts are only just around the corner. So, as I said, the franchise world keeps on rolling around, and guys like Glenn Maxwell have got a big part to play in that over the next few years for him. I'm sure he'll have a few years left in the tank.
Yeah, I mean, the franchise tournaments do build up, as you say, and the talk that one day we'll have windows for international cricket. It's not going to be easy because, as you said, that we've got the IPL running pretty close to the Major League Cricket running into the 100, into the Caribbean Premier League. Before you know it, and prior to that, we've got the Big Bash and the other leagues as well. That it's there's not many slots left available. So the thing about it is that as long as they get the pitches right in America, and it might take a little bit of time to get them suitably conducive to attractive stroke play, then the thing that excites me is that it will be a great product. I mean, in the past, as much as I've wanted to get Americans into cricket, you could say, "Oh, come to the cricket with me," and you sit and see the first session of a Test match, and it's 2 for 56 at lunch, and no one's played a shot, and they might think, "Are you all right in the head that you're watching this game?" So the fact that if they get the pitches right, it'll be a great product. I think it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think it is too. It's certainly something I like to keep an eye on. I'd love to have the calendar full. And as you said, once you start to swing around, you throw in the PSL and the T20, the IL20, and before you start getting to some of the less renowned ones, as you said, some of the ones that we maybe thought Major League Cricket was going to be like that one that was in Canada for a couple of years. It could still be going on for all I know. There's some, might be nice to say second rate. And then, you've got the European stuff, which is just absolutely bizarre. It's worse than park cricket you'll see around here, but it's entertaining for just absolute nonsense clips. But look, it's great to see. It's great to see some of these players are able to, line their pockets after careers where they've made good incomes, but they've given up a lot in terms of the travel they do with international cricket. And, I think that's a great part of it, and it gives us the extra entertainment value that spreads it to the broader market that isn't those not right in the head, I think, were your words, Paul, guys like yourself and I who will sit and watch 5 days of Test cricket where, 2 days are interrupted by rain and we're sitting there just begging for it to come back on so we can watch teams score it 2 and over and get into the grind.
Well, the thing about Test cricket as well is that I think it's at its best version in history as well. I sometimes when I look back at old scorecards or games that I remember in the 90s or in the 80s, and I just think, just that there'd be this realisation that it was heading for a draw by about day 2 or day 3, and that was just accepted. And the run rate was slow, and if a slow run rate doesn't equate to boring cricket, but it can do as well. Now I think that it would be a great pity if Test cricket did sort of really shrivel and wither on the vine now, when I think it's the most watchable format it's been in possibly forever. Hopefully someone can find a way to have all of this become adding to each other rather than cannibalising each other. But, yeah, it's a difficult challenge.
It's a huge job trying to align all of the calendar, maintain those elements, as you say. But, yeah, I agree, Test cricket in its best spot in terms of the way it's going about it. Lots of matches finishing in results, which we saw at the highest peak in 2024, and hopefully that continues on. But as always, Paul, if people want to go even more in-depth into their cricket, they can check out the Dennett on Cricket podcast. Lots of wonderful coverage undoubtedly coming over as we head into that West Indies series, and then we've got South Africa here at home, and then it all builds towards that massive Ashes summer. We've seen lots of sellouts already. So a big thank you to you, as always, for jumping on the show.
Thanks, Chris. My pleasure.
Well, it's now time to move on to the Rugby League. And, of course, when we're talking Rugby League, we bring in our Rugby League guru, Matt Willoughby. Good to have you back, Matt.
Yeah, Chris, thanks for having me. But I've got a question for you today. It's like, is Origin dead? I mean, I don't want to sound like a sore loser, and congrats to Queensland on the 2-point victory last night, but I'm sort of torn between that last night being the worst Origin in recent history, or maybe giving them a pass mark due to the weather and conditions. But I mean, that for a game that's Origin or semi-finals, I'm not sure I've ever seen a worse kicking game from both sides. Some of the passing was atrocious, not finding the chest. Like, there was some real junior footy stuff there last night. It wasn't a great game, but as we sort of mentioned, the score line and the closeness at the end probably made everyone think it was a barnstormer.
Yeah, that was the interesting piece, and I think you and I sort of engaged on Twitter about this straight after the game, didn't we? It was there was people straight away calling it a classic, and it's one of the banes of my existence when I look at rugby league, and people see a game and it finishes 26-24 or 12-10, and they go, "Oh, that must have been a good game." This game demonstrated two of the worst halves of rugby league played by two individual sides that I've seen in recent memory, and that includes at like local park level, which you and I both watch a bit of footy at those levels. The first half from New South Wales was poor. It was poorly executed. It was poorly disciplined. There's been a lot of critique around I think it was 8 or 9-0 penalty count, but I find it really hard to argue. You might have been able to find one or two for New South Wales, or maybe have let go of one or two, but plenty of it, and we'll talk about the judiciary outcomes in a little bit, plenty of it was just borderline, just brain fade, dumb stuff. Like Nathan Cleary kicking the ball out in the full twice. Like, when does that happen?
Yeah, he kicked the ball out in the full twice. I mean, I know it was sort of the second half, but also Cameron Munster kicked for the in goal, and I think it ended about 25 rows into the back, past the back fence at one stage. Luai kicking out on the full. It was just pretty awful stuff. And even Nathan was throwing some balls. There was one where Payne Haas, it was thrown behind him, and he had to reach back and try and get it. With the refereeing, as you say, like the penalties, nothing really stands out as egregious that I could see. The only small issue I had was that a couple of times I saw that Klein had called play on, and then a few seconds later he's called a penalty. So he's obviously getting a call from somewhere, which apparently they'll like to tell you that the bunker doesn't get involved during the game, only at stoppages. So I'm not sure about that. And the other issue, which is a bit of a bone of mine, is the six agains. I know that Ashley enjoys a six again call, but there's not much recourse for those. There's not much review. There's not much going back and seeing what it was for and if it was fair or if it was not. Whereas penalties we can analyse pretty easily. So that was worse in my opinion than the penalties. Which, I think back through the game and nothing stands out as as something that shouldn't have been penalised.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. I think the narrative that gets built around it. I think there was, some of the reviews as well, which probably didn't shine a great light on Ashley Klein. I think there was 2 or 3 that New South Wales managed to get overturned. So he didn't have a great strike rate last night with the captain's challenges either. Yeah,
I mean, the rule with captain challenges, especially in Origin, is you shouldn't be using them unless it's the last 15 minutes. But Cleary got penalised for ripping the ball out after about 10 minutes, and it was the most obvious just pop out because of the conditions. And you got to go with the captain's challenge, but that didn't look great on Ashley's behalf either. That's for sure.
I think the only 2 that were upheld were the ones very late in the game where both teams were clearly challenging, and one was that Payne Haas knock on, and it was just a matter of New South Wales trying to gather their breath more than anything. They knew that it was a knock on, but. Do you think when you talk about, is Origin dead? And I don't think it is, but it certainly in a microcosm doesn't look great. But is it because of some of the absolute belters we've had in the last 2 years? And it looked like Origin was going to another level in some of those games. But as you say, this one's it's park football at its worst. Yeah,
I mean, I definitely think it has something to do with that. We have such high expectations of what's happened, not only historically, but recently, as you say. And you just don't expect the defensive lapses, the handling errors that we saw, and like last night, there were so many tries on the edges where it was just a count your man or trust the bloke next to you, and you sort of you don't expect that level of mistake in Origin. Like even in club, like it shows what sort of a weird game it was last night. Even Stephen Crichton made some handling errors and some defensive misreads last night. So, maybe it's the pressure. Maybe it's the pressure of the game that's got to them. But you sort of are hoping that you're not getting scored one set for one set. Like you can defend a few sets. You're not getting beaten the outside. You're not getting beat in the centre through the middle with blokes just turning in too early. Like those are defensive reads that you sort of be disappointed if they happen in the NRL, let alone this elite level.
Yeah, I think to that point, I think you can excuse, some of the big physical shots we saw. I think we saw Liam Martin on both ends of these, where the ball's just jammed out in wet, slippery conditions. You can understand.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yep.
Then you had New South Wales, I think, late in the game. Connor Watson came on. And again, Connor Watson, usually a really good decision maker out of dummy half, where they just kept going the short side, even though they had no in space. And there were things that, like, you've got a son who plays footy, mate. If the under 13s, under 14s are doing that, you're pulling your hair out as a coach, let alone Yeah, Laurie Daly looked bereft of answers when they interviewed him at halftime.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I remember the set where you're talking about where they're about 20 metres out with sort of 4 or 5 minutes to go, 3 minutes to go, and they'd opened up the left side, which is where they'd scored all their tries through Brian Toho, and they kept grinding down a short side, which was well defended and dummy half short forward plays when they actually opened up the field to actually use that left side, and they never even got there. And then, just little errors like 30 seconds to go, you're still a chance, and Dylan Edwards makes an unaccustomed mistake dropping the ball or knocking it on. It was just, maybe it was just one of those nights.
And I think that's the thing, right? Like, it wasn't that, we looked at game one and there was a couple of players that stood out as glaring issues. There wasn't too many players here who stood out as, glaringly obvious. I mean, Jerome Luai in the first half did some really silly things, and we'll get onto his charge in a minute as well. But there's a couple of players for mine from both sides that probably we didn't see a lot of or nearly as much.
Yeah.
Like, Young was very quiet. He's one that I wanted to see some more impact out of. Kalen Ponga was still quite missing for Queensland. I think the only time I really noticed him was when Stephen Crichton decided to throw his headgear about 15 rows into the crowd.
Yeah.
Pieces. But, yeah, there wasn't anyone that I was sort of looking at and just going, geez, like, this comes down to last game, like we went, Daly Cherry Evans and a couple of others didn't have the impact, and Queensland made those changes. But yeah, there wasn't any one player, as you say. It might have been one of those nights where everyone had the jitters.
Yeah, I thought a few players stood up. Like, he made some errors, but Munster played really well. My thing with Dearden was he played really well in the first half, but then I don't really remember seeing much of him in the second half. When the game's on the line and you need a controlling halfback, it was sort of left to Munster a bit to do all of that work. I after the game was trying to think back, and I thought I don't really remember much of an impact by Dearden at all in the second half, and they sort of lost that half 24-0 or whatever it was. So it was certainly a game for the grinders. Like, I thought one of New South Wales' best players was Hudson Young, playing sort of 50 minutes through the middle, just cleaning up everywhere, defending, making runs. And similarly for Queensland, like a guy like Luke Capewell, I thought was probably their second best player outside of Munster. So maybe, it was just a clean up, and even the big boys, probably it wasn't a game for them. Like, a few like Mo Fodawaker and also Max King didn't really get many minutes after their first stint. I'm not sure either of them came back on after their first stint. So maybe it was just for the harder working, grinding type players.
Yeah, potentially. I think it's one of those ones too. We probably didn't see a lot of spark out of some of the spine players outside of short windows. Like, there was some real quiet windows. Again, as we said, Ponga didn't do a lot. Even Dylan Edwards had a couple of moments, but the first half was, you've seen Harry Grant, and neither of the nines really did a lot. I don't think they did a lot wrong either, but they didn't really, didn't see those moments of absolute brilliance from them. But was it the conditions? On that spine area, let's talk about Jerome Luai. And I was bemused at the time. Like, we know how much the commentators, Channel 9 and Foxtel, love to just go over and over and watch slow motion replays of things. That incident early in the game where it appeared that he eye gouged one of the Queensland players, he might have caught one back himself, but it just got brushed over so quickly. It was just a penalty. They kind of put the incident on report and moved on. I was really surprised. I know Origin, they play under a little bit different rules, but we talked about Hudson Young before. That didn't look that dissimilar to things that Hudson Young back in, I think, 2019 copped 5 and 8 weeks for, respectively.
Yeah, I thought it was one of those ones that happened so quickly you really wanted to go back and have a proper look at it. But it could have been a combination of the fact that, the game was quite fast moving at that point and they'd sort of moved on and didn't really get back to it. But yeah, I certainly thought it deserved more than the quick glance that they gave it on the TV coverage, that's for sure. And when you watch it on social media, you do see that, wow, it was a pretty nasty sort of play that was there. And I see you mentioned it before, but I see he's got charged, but it's just a fine. He's not going to have any weeks out of the game. It sort of does seem hard to reconcile against some other things that have happened in that sort of facial type area recently that you've sort of mentioned before.
Yeah, it's a challenging one. And again, in perspective, I think the fine, he'll take the early guilty plea because it's 13% of his match payment. So I think it's $4,000 out of a $30,000 match payment. I mean, I'm glad for Tigers fans that he is still there because we obviously know how crucial he's going to be to, the back half of their season. And, if he had a cop to a 5 or 6 week ban for playing in Origin, but those sorts of things, surely they're going to count against him when Laurie Haley's looking at what he's doing for Game 3. Yes, he was part of that comeback that got them within striking distance, but he hasn't covered himself in glory there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, as a Tiger, he certainly brought some Tiger form to that game. I thought he was fairly awful through the game. And besides that, he just runs around a bit like a headless chook these days. Like, his one saving grace was a beautiful grubber he kicked for the Angus Crichton try. But besides that, I thought, he certainly hasn't done anything to make him unpickable for the next game. But it is interesting because the thing is that how much were they covering up Nathan Cleary? I mean, he didn't want to kick in the first half. He wasn't kicking goals. He had the thing on his leg. How was he ever in doubt? Like, was there ever an issue over his fitness? If Mitch Moses has played, is there a world in which Nathan didn't? Like, it's hard to really know. And I will say, as an aside, my highlight of the commentary last night was when one of the sideline commentators said that at the captain's run, Nathan was going round to the kick goal kicking positions and visualising the kicks because he was in. I would have liked to know that in advance because I would have probably played my bets a bit differently. But visualising the kick is an interesting thing to be doing in the captain's run.
And have they got Bradley Stubbs back in the coach whisperer?
The whisperer, yeah.
He's it's an interesting one. Goal kicking's been an Achilles heel, and considering
5 tries to 4.
I mean, the two guys they've got are normally pretty safe goal kickers in Lomax and Cleary. So it's a weird situation, but as we look forward to, and speaking of Lomax, he was charged as well for his tackle on Trent Liero, so he'll get a fine as well, even more minor than the one that Luai got. So he got grade 1 contrary conduct. But looking ahead now as we head to Game 3, it's on home turf for New South Wales. You'd think after that comeback, New South Wales will be the favourites for it as well. Do you see that there's going to be much in the way of changes, or do the coaches and teams focus on, I guess, what the takeaways were from their positive half rather than their negative half?
Yeah, I think New South Wales aren't going to make any changes. The only changes will be around the fitness of the halves there. I mean, Mitchell Moses will come straight in if he's fit. If Nathan's got some worries, you just never know what's going to happen there. But for mine, on a dry track with Mitchell Moses and Nathan Cleary 100% fitness, I think New South Wales win by 13 plus, like a big score on a dry track. Like you still saw the weaknesses that Queensland have in their lineup there last night, and now the problem is that you can't really see Billy Lee changing the team around too much on the back of a victory. So I think he's probably locked in as well. So depending on New South Wales fitness, that's the only area I would be thinking.
Yeah, I think fitness is probably the only thing. I think based on those performances, it'd be pretty hard to go and make too many changes. The question I've got is, the talk about Moses is he's predicted to come back in round 20, which is obviously post that next game. If he's not available, do you stick with Luai and just the fact that he and Cleary have had that combination previously, allowing that Cleary's fit? I mean, if Cleary's not fit too, and Moses isn't fit, that's a big question mark for New South Wales.
Well, if Cleary's not fit and Moses isn't fit, then the Shield might be going back to Queensland. but yeah, all things being equal, you got to stick with Luai. I mean, he wasn't perfect last night, but the combinations and even the combinations with the rest of the players, I don't think anyone that they could bring in is going to be able to match that sort of comparison. So I think Luai would be the one who played if Mitch is not back then.
Let's throw the hypothetical there then. Let's say that Cleary's leg is no good and Mitch Moses isn't there. Who partners Jerome Luai? Do they go to the next generation in Isaiah Katoa?
Well, I would, but it'd be a big step to take, wouldn't it? I mean, his form so far this year has been absolutely. The last 6 weeks has been off the charts. Like, he's Nathan Cleary light, but he's not that light anymore. He's getting close to him. So I'd be surprised if he wasn't I mean, without looking at the draw and seeing who the Dolphins play, he should be in this camp for the whole way through for the next camp, whether there's an injury cloud or not, because he's not far away. He should definitely. I can't see anyone else. You look back who they picked before. You're not going back to Nico. You're not. Cody Walker's injured anyway. Like, you're not going to throw someone else in without the experience. I think you'd have to go with Katoa.
I think he ends up being the future. I think maybe, we look 5 years down the track and it's maybe a Katoa and Strange or something like that based on what we're seeing at the moment. But the Dolphins have put 50 points on basically every week for the last 3 weeks, and they're playing the Knights this week, so you'd be brave to back against them not doing it again.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see, fingers crossed that that's not the case. But I even think that, just getting him into camp for a little bit might not be a bad strategy for the future, because we're going to need some solutions as we head forward. But while we're on, Billy and not making any changes, Billy's comments of in the lead up raised some ire as well around, the whole Paul Green thing. It led to some people bringing out some stuff from about 15 years ago where Billy made some maybe light of Corey Patterson's mental health at the time. I think it's probably a bit deep to go and pull up things from people 15 years ago, because I'd hate to see what my Twitter and other social media look like in 2010. But did he go too far with this, or is this just the storm in a teacup of the Origin lens?
Oh, I totally went too far. I mean, he's smart enough to know that, Aaron Woods is a knockabout bloke who does Triple M radio in the morning. I mean, if you've ever listened to Triple M radio in the morning, they take the piss on every single thing under the sun. Like, he waited a week and was it T-balled to him by one of the Queensland journalists? Who knows? He turned something that was, that was pretty simple, pretty humorous, and a bit of a piss take into something extremely serious. Like, I heard someone say yesterday, there's not one player who's played NRL first grade who hasn't been a grub on the field at some point in time. Like, you don't get there without having some grubby things in your game. It's just part of the game. You get called a grub on the football field, doesn't mean they're calling you a grub out in real life, or that sort of stuff. And then to add, it probably could have got away with it, but once you bring the Paul Green stuff in, then that's just the the sort of lowest of the low. And I really thought he was rattled yesterday when he had his press conference to apologise. And I sort of thought, if they didn't get out of that game last night, would he have gone for the job next year? Would it be nearly curtains because he's just muffed it up that badly?
Yeah, well, I saw you tweeted that, and that was a commentary I actually said to a couple of people, because I actually had a shot at a couple of people who dragged up the Corey Patterson stuff, and I was like, look, 15 years ago is a long time to judge people on, and realistically, if being called a grub is the worst thing in your world, I think you probably need to take a reflection. I think, as you say, though, it really showed that he was a little rattled, and he was trying to do that old Queenslander thing of trying to get something to get everyone to rally against, and the most Queensland of Queenslanders, Gordon Tallis, got on board with him and decided to throw his lot in with it.
Yeah, and he should have left it to Gordy, because, it's Gordy's job. Laurie Daly didn't come out and speak about it. Like, it's Gordy or, whoever else in the Queensland media, Chris Close. It's, someone else's job to come in and throw stones back, not the coach on 2 days before the game.
Yeah, exactly right. As you say, I think he's dodged a bullet. He would have been probably needing to fall on his sword at the end of the series had they lost last night. But we'll head to game 3. But while we're talking Origin, Matty, being Thursday now, the day after, we've got some prime opportunity to watch the next gen of stars. We've got the men's and the women's under-19s tonight. It's on free to air. The women's under-19s will be live as our show goes out. The men's under-19s, I think, kicks off at about 7:45. There's some real guns here to watch, and I know there's one or two that you've had your eye on in terms of it. And there's a couple that I'll pick out too, probably more so in the men's, because as we said, the girls' game is underway. And the first one I'm going to throw to you is someone that we've both got some high raps on. He's coming off the bench for New South Wales, Gold Coast Titans, Zane Harrison.
Yeah, I mean, Zane's a player I follow quite closely, actually. I think he's a bit unlucky in the fact that he plays for the Gold Coast Titans, and he's sort of more in the Queensland eye than the New South Wales eye, and he sort of gets forgotten about a bit. But he's coming through the system, and he's just a gun organising halfback who has a great kicking game, great passing game, and really reads the play, and a real director halfback role. And I know that they won the Schoolboy Cup last year, I think, for Palm Beach Currumbin, and he was player of the series in that. And also he's played for the Gold Coast Titans, the Tweed Heads team in the Melbourne Inga Cup up here, and he's led them to victory there. So I was sort of a little disappointed he's on the bench because I think, he deserves probably a chance, but also in saying that, there's huge raps on these two Canterbury halves who are the 7 and 6, which is Mitchell Woods and Toby Rodwell. And Woods played this game again last year, and he was pretty awesome there as well. So, there's certainly a bit of a production line coming through for the players there.
And there certainly is. And Rodwell, he's the son of former New South Wales Blue Brett Rodwell as well. And, he was part of the SG Ball Cup win this year and, kicked a late field goal, I think, the 5'8". So comes from good stock and he's a name to watch. I think his brother Tom might be playing on the wing for the Roosters in New South Wales Cup as well. So some good piece there. The other one I want to touch on from a New South Wales point of view is Vitano, the fullback who played in this game last year as well. He's come through the night system and he's been one that's been pretty highly touted. We talked about this off air. It's not necessarily always that hard to be highly touted when you're coming through a struggling system, and you might be the next great white hope, as Vitano might be at the Knights. But look, the Knights are pretty heavily represented here too. They've got 3 or 4 players in this side, and it's always interesting that some of the sides who might be battling a little bit more do have some good representation here. But it's going to be interesting. The Queensland side's got some players with some big raps on them too, though. So it's not just New South Wales heading all in. I know we were talking about it before. Kobe Black, the captain, the halfback's probably a name that's been up in lights for a while.
Yeah, he's been in the Broncos system for quite a long time. There was even some talk through earlier in the year when Reynolds was injured, I think, or possibly was going to be injured, that maybe they would blood him for a game because, and he also played this game last year. So both of those halfbacks probably played when they were 17, 18 last year, which shows sort of the qualities that they have. And yeah, they're certainly wouldn't be surprised to see Kobe get a Broncos start, if not the back end of this year, perhaps early next year if an opportunity arose.
And certainly one last one I'll touch on, obviously just because of my love of nostalgia, is the man in the number 13 for Queensland, Cooper Bai, the son of Marcus Bai, the former, he's still alive, but the former Storm and PNG flyer, who was he was a cult hero in the early days of the Storm, wasn't he? After he was almost an unwanted stock when they first started out. So, mate, if Cooper could get half the cult following his old man, he's obviously got a bit more probably height and breadth about him. I mean, Marcus wasn't small; he was stocky, but playing in the middle there, it'll be interesting to watch him go around.
Yeah, no, there's certainly you sort of brought him up earlier, and yeah, he'll be a player I'll keep my eye out for tonight as well, because yeah, it'd be interesting as a lock. He's probably going to be getting plenty of action. So yeah, it should be a good game, and it's great to see that it gets put on free to air for everyone to look at. And I know that some of the commentators like Andrew Johns, and I know Gus is not everyone's cup of tea, but he really gets into these games, and he knows a lot of the backgrounds to the players, so it's definitely well worth a watch.
We're in that era now. There's so much available at your fingertips. You can go and check them out. But the great thing is, as we talked about, they're both on free to air. The women's game will be on, as this show is, on Gem, and then the boys' game at 7:45 will be on Channel 9, the main channel. So go and check it out once you've watched the end of our show. But Matty, as always, great to have you on. Great to pick apart Origin, and looking forward to talking to you in a couple more weeks as we review Origin 3 and hopefully a healthy Blues and a healthy Shield lift at home at the Olympic Stadium.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping for. A nice 13 plus or something like that in New South Wales.
Well, that brings to a close another big episode of the Chris McPherson Show, your home of the black and white of your sport. No grey opinions here, and a big thank you to our co-host this week coming on board, Paul Dennett from the Dennett on Cricket podcast, our resident rugby league guru, Matt Willoughby. You can catch him on Twitter at OzBookie and check out all of his opinions around the rugby league space. And of course, our man on the ones and twos, he brings all the magic together and he delivers us all the motorsport insights as well as pitching in for the Around the Grounds this week, J.R. Carter. Of course, to keep up to date with us, make sure you've subscribed to our YouTube and share it with a friend as well. We'd love to continue to grow our platform, and we'd love to hear from you what you'd like to see more of. And if seeing us on YouTube isn't enough, you can, of course, check out our social medias. You can find us on X. You can find us on Instagram, on TikTok, and on Facebook at The Chris Mack Show. But until next week, make sure you stay tuned for our daily doses dropping in between. But we'll bring you another show in another 7 days. Enjoy your week in sport.